Hey, what's up, YouTube? Basically, I'm going to be talking about the local churches today. So, in a sense, I'm not like opposing the local churches. I'm just like talking about my experience. Um, I grew up in the local churches. I was born into a family who grew up in the church, and I lived in Washington. I was born in Washington, and kind of we had a kind of ironic time here because we went through a lot of stuff. My dad had a lot of issues personally. I never really knew why he did some of the things that he did. I don't know if it had anything to do with the church, but I know that my dad lived in Seattle in the 80s, and or my family lived in Seattle, basically. My mom, my dad, and then my two older siblings lived in Seattle in the late 70s, early 80s, and then they moved to a small town called Moses Lake, which is where I was born. Um, Basically, my dad met a fellow, I guess you would call him brother there, and that brother was an alcoholic, and he got my dad into drinking. And then my dad became an alcoholic and kind of went downhill from there, and then had issues with the church and all that. Simply because they had invited him over to their location because they promised that some leading brother was like this great guy. And he would like take care of my dad and make my dad feel right at home. And it was like this big club or whatever. And my dad just kind of fell for it. But they kind of just left him high and dry because even though they brought him over there, they just like, I guess apparently they descended from Brother Lee, and they just kind of disbanded as a church or as part of a local church. So that happened within the local church, and I don't blame the local churches for that, really, that aspect, because that's just some people who are not in coordination with the local church. Some Christians who were going off and doing their own thing. Do I see the importance of being in coordination? Theoretically, yes. So, in that sense, I don't blame those guys who went off rogue from the rest of the churches or whatever. In theory, I understand why the local churches are united, why they say they're united, and I don't have a problem with it. So I'm just giving you guys a little background history. So like I said, I grew up in Moses Lake, and then I moved to Spokane, Washington, and lived there for probably 10 years. Went to church for about 5 of those years, maybe 4 of those years, and I was just kind of a kid, didn't really know much. And then I got older, and then I went through in my early 20s, and I went through like a lot of soul searching because I was going through some personal things, and I decided to go back to God, in the sense that I had like a conversion, I guess you could say, and gave my life to God and all that kind of stuff. I guess I became born again, in the traditional sense, where one sees that Christ died for their death, and all that. It was very typical. There was nothing spectacular, or nothing non-spectacular. It was just very typical, I guess. If you read other Christians testimonies on how they got saved, it was just a matter of repenting and believing, and that kind of thing. When I look back on that, I don't necessarily have a lot of doubt, like, was it a real experience or anything like that. It was what it was. I don't know if I was, maybe not in the greatest frame of mind during that time, because I was going through a lot of mental issues. But I know that there was a lot of, my mom had raised us constantly talking about the end of the world, Armageddon, constantly talking about, Christ was going to come back, and we were raised to believe that at any moment God could come back and the world would end, and we were encouraged to live our lives according to that. which basically means surrendering all to God and giving our entire life over to God, which is a really, really big belief in the local churches. And I believed it. I believed in it conditionally because that's just what I was conditioned to believe. I just thought this is the right way. I didn't consider, how many other religions are there? How many thousands or, hundreds and hundreds of religions are there in the world? Why is ours the best? And we had that attitude, like ours was the best because, Brother Lee and Brother Nee are the ones who broke down the Bible the best. And so therefore we were better than everyone else. And that's kind of the air that you have in the recovery in the churches, is that people have the idea that the recovery is better than any other church. Doctrinally speaking, I think that, I consider myself to be a fairly intelligent person. I've read other preachers and sermons, and I've heard others other preachers and sermons, and doctrinally I think the recovery has probably the best doctrine as far as breaking down the Bible and understanding the Bible in terms of metaphors and pictures and types in the Old Testament and and that kind of stuff. I have no doubt that the things that they talk about in the Bible are probably some of the best, interpretations of the Bible and what the Bible really means. The only problem is that the local church kind of acts like a cult in the sense that they want all the members to conform, to basically give up their lives for Jesus. That's kind of something that is expected of you being in the local church, and it's kind of, there's no point in going if you're not that kind of person, because everyone who goes to Sunday services is like that. That's kind of an unspoken rule there, is that if you're going to church there, you're following God. You're there you're loving God and you're loving Christ, and you're kind of expected to not love anything else. And that's kind of what they preach. And so and that's one of the main things that I have a problem with, is that I think that it really affected me growing up in a situation where my mom was constantly talking about the end of the world, was constantly talking about how, Satan's in this world and the devil is ruling and all this stuff. You hear it as a young kid and you're like, it kind of scares you because you think that it's like, the right thing. You think that it's like, this is what, the world's about, because they have it broken down so succinctly, like, okay, well, God created us and we're here to be God's vessels, and therefore everything we put into our soul and our heart, blah, 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 is, should be God. And if it's anything else, then we're contaminating ourselves, and it's sin and all this kind of stuff. And now that I'm old and you get to a certain age and you start to think critically, and you start to think for yourself, and you say, wait a minute, is this really true? Like, is this something that's really happening? Is God really going to come back, or is God, and then you look at it and you're like, well, I mean, we're just here, I mean, we're just living life. And when we live in the type of way that we think, the world is against us as Christians, and the world is against the recovery, then we kind of put ourselves into a position where we're judging other people, and we stay away from other people, which kind of makes us cultish. It kind of makes us like the Amish. And I don't know if technically if the Amish are cultish, and I don't know if technically what I mean is cultish, but at least it makes us like separatists, where we're like, we're away from everybody else because they're sinners and they're wrong, and we're right, and we're just waiting for God to come back. And that's how I feel like the recovery, is, I mean, from my perspective, honestly, from what I've seen, is, in the church, you have a lot of people who do love God, who do love Jesus, and I'll give them that, and I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. If you love God, if you love Jesus, that's fine, but when you say that I love Jesus so much that I can't like hang out with somebody, or I can't talk to somebody, or I can't like watch a movie, it gets to be like, a little scary. It gets to be to a point where you're kind of like, these people are kind of fanatics, like they're kind of like the Amish. They're just a little weirdly separated from the rest of society. And you have to say like, well, wait a minute, these people, they're like, they don't watch movies. They don't listen to like, modern music. They believe that many things are sin, and if you do them, they don't believe that if you sin, you're going to go to hell, but they believe that if you sin, you'll lose your reward in the next age, which basically is the millennium, according to them. According to the Bible, I won't deny that it's not in the Bible, but this is what they believe. And, basically everything they do revolves around this reward, and it's a reward in, in the next age. And that's the kind of thing that makes me think that the church is fanatic, and the church's teachings are fanatic, because how do we know, that that's going to be like that in the next life? Because the Bible says so. What if the Bible's wrong? People don't think about that. What if, you believe a book that's, been in, I don't care how old it is, it's thousands of years old, but still, there's other writings that are thousands of years old. The Quran, why wouldn't you believe the Quran? Because it just has different writings. It just has different teachings. That, that's a little one-sided, and also people don't know that there's a lot of books that were written that were not allowed into the Bible when the Bible got, when the Bible was canonized. There was a lot of books that were just barred. So why weren't those books allowed, and why were certain books allowed, and why weren't other books allowed? I don't know. Maybe there's an answer for that I just haven't come across yet. But if you believe the Bible, that's fine. I have no problem with you. But if you take what the Bible says to a point where you aren't interacting with people, or you're just, off doing your own thing, or you judge other people, based on the fact that, they aren't, they don't have the same beliefs as you, with regards to quote unquote the world. People in the recovery believe that the world, which is like a system that they believe, which I tend to agree with. I think the world is a system, to some extent. I think that it has to be a system, because otherwise, it wouldn't be organized. Otherwise it wouldn't function very well. So I believe that it should be a system, in a sense, but the way that they paint it is that it's a negative system, and it's against God, and it's always been that way. I will say that I believe that the world system doesn't always honor God, or doesn't always, follow God's commandments. Definitely not. I know there's a lot of things that are contrary to the Bible, but who's to say that your way is the right way? Like if you look at history, Christians have come in to, indigenous tribes and new countries, and they've forced their beliefs on other people, and they've forced them to integrate into systems that they just, weren't used to. You come in and steal Indians' lands, and then you force God upon them. It doesn't look good for your faith, and how I look at the recovery is I just view them as separatists. I view them as people who basically, believe in the Bible and, follow the truths that they believe are in the Bible, but at the same time, they judge other people in the sense that they don't interact with other people, and they truly deep down believe that if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. They truly deep down believe that if you are a backslidden Christian, you are going to go into what they call the dark room, which is apparently some kind of jail set aside for people who weren't overcomers in this age, and they call that the millennium and whatnot. So they believe a lot of stuff that's really, it has to do with conforming. Like if you don't believe that, in the millennium, you're going to lose your reward and be in the dark room, then you're just like not part of what the program that they're teaching. You're not part of the program. So it is a program. And I believe a lot of it is programming, in the sense that, I grew up with my mom constantly telling me the world was going to end and people out there were wrong and ruthless. And I'm not saying there's not wrong and ruthless people in the world. There's no crime or anything like that. But when you tell a kid that he can't like hang out with certain people, or he can't do certain things because it's worldly, because the people who are doing it are worldly and sinful, then you kind of make your kid into a kind of, I don't know why you want to call it cult leader, cult person. Like he's just weird. He's different. He's not going to interact well. He's not going to grow. And that's kind of what happened with me, was that like, and even my family to some extent, is that we're all kind of damaged because, you have all these views and all these beliefs, and they keep you from living a normal life. They keep you from having, being happy and having normal friends. And, I watched my family deteriorate. And I wouldn't blame it on the local church. My father had a choice whether or not he wanted to be an alcoholic. And my mom had a choice whether or not she wanted to stick with him, and et cetera, et cetera. But I know that when my dad did become an alcoholic, my mom stuck with my dad because the Bible says you shouldn't, divorce, and because she felt that she was embarrassed as a woman to, divorce my dad or leave my dad. And I think a lot of that had heavy pressure with the church. I'm not blaming the church for her decision, but I think that a lot of what the church's teachings came into her decision, and it really affected our lives, because we wouldn't have been as bad if my mom would have left, because my dad was, kind of off the rocker, and he was out doing, alcohol and all that kind of stuff. So if my mom would have left, our lives would have been significantly better, but she did stay because she believed that the recovery was the way to go. And she needs to, stay with my father because, of all the reasons laid out in the Bible, you shouldn't divorce and all that kind of stuff. And so, I will say that at the least that contributed. I don't blame that directly, but, I just know that I grew up in a situation where there's a lot of pressure to stay away from quote unquote worldly people and worldly things and simple things. And so I just feel like I would compare the local churches to probably some Amish people. I would compare them to some kind of separatist people, because they really don't interact with the world. They kind of stay away from any quote unquote worldly situations, or situations that they view as worldly, and worldly is negative to most people. When you say like TV or television or music, most people think like that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just entertainment. But to people in the local churches, these kind of things are really bad and really negative, and they view them as things that you can lose your reward for if so to me, that's like, it's really kind of brainwashing, because they're telling people what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And they're saying, if you do those things, you're going to lose a reward. So they're keeping people kind of in a fold, I guess you could say, keeping people sort of in jail, in their minds, because they're holding this reward over their heads, and apparently it's according to the Bible. And I think that's a little, I mean, not even a little, I think that's really, really kind of manipulative and messed up. People are just made to be happy. People are made to interact with each other. And, if somebody's sinning or somebody's doing something wrong, hurting somebody else in the sense that, they're doing something that's harming others, like, I think that's wrong, right? But if you say someone's just, like, someone has a job and they bought like a jet ski, like, if you say that's wrong because you should have, you should be more in touch with God, and you don't need a jet ski and that kind of thing. Like, that's what the recovery teaches, is that, like, you can't love the world. Like, apparently that's in the Bible, is love for the world is, if you love the world, you're an enemy to God. So what does that mean? That means you just sacrifice your happiness for what? For something that you might not, something that after you die, you might not even get because you're of your behavior. So what that does is that forces people to give their life to something. It forces people to give their life to an idea, meaning they can't do a whole lot of stuff that other regular people do. And that's control. That's person control, not just mind control. That's person control. Like, the recovery never says we'll kick you out. We'll tar and feather you if you don't believe what we believe, but they will, not interact with you if they feel like you're a sinner, if they feel like this and that. I personally have been to a place where I feel like people didn't interact with me, because I was sinning. I got to a point, what happened was I came back, like I said, I had a personal experience where, I found God, and then I was doing some soul searching, and really what it was I for a lot of years, because of what happened with my dad, I was really a kind of rebellious kid, as far as, like, obeying my mother, because my mother was always kind of crazy, and she was always telling me these crazy things about the recovery, and I just didn't listen, and I was really rebellious, and then I got sick, and then I came back sort of to the church, because I had gone to the church when I was a kid, and I was doing some soul searching, and I said, well, what's the best way for me? What's the best, I wanted to find some things that I could, get into as far as life goes, and join, and so I did some soul searching, and I realized, well, maybe I'll try this church thing, because this is what I grew up in. And for a few years, it was like kind of cool, for like about a year. And basically, I was accepted when I came back. I got baptized, and people really liked me, and people were like, all smiley and stuff to me, and really treated me nice and stuff. And then I moved to a different city, and then people treated me differently, and it was like, and then I realized that people were just really nice to me because I had grown up in that city, and they knew me when I was a kid. But then once I became an adult, and then I went to this other church, and nobody really knew me, and I didn't grow up there, nobody really cared about me. Like, people just, like, looked at me like I was just some guy. Like, they didn't even know who I was, and they just didn't even talk to me, or I was trying to be open with them, and they, like, kind of ignored me. And bear in mind, this church was in a little bit more higher class area. And basically I just felt like I was being ignored. And so that kind of contributed to me, not wanting to go to their meetings. And then I kind of went off, and then I found some other friends, and then I realized, I just started to slowly, think about things. And then I realized, once I wasn't in the church, once I stopped going to church, people, particularly my mom, kind of judged me, and really, like, started talking bad to me, about, like, my lifestyle. And I felt like what I was doing was normal for somebody my age, but just not normal for somebody in the church. Things that I was doing, which had to do with, like, dating and my recreation, like, my entertainment, like what I would do for fun. I just felt like I was being judged, like if it wasn't, if I wasn't praying, or if I wasn't calling on the name of God, which is what they do in the local churches. They call on the name of God, and they pray and they sing. And if I wasn't doing those things, then I was like this bad person. And I feel like people in recovery feel that way too. They feel like if you're not praising God, if you're not really quote unquote enjoying Christ as they say it, then you're like, there's something wrong with you or something. And that's how I was viewed. And I was a little bit more quiet person. I wasn't really outgoing. And I wasn't really like, I mean, it's not that I wasn't outgoing. I wasn't vocally loving God like they were, even though I was, there, and I would pray and stuff. It was just, it wasn't as enthusiastic as they were. And so I think people looked at me really weird, like I was like there's something wrong with me. And then I had this one experience with this guy who I was talking with, and we were talking about basketball. We were talking about college basketball, and we were talking about a team, and then all of a sudden, like maybe I was too enthusiastic talking about this team, or whatever, but it was actually after a meeting, and where and the location where I met, they kind of talked a lot after meetings and stuff, and the kid goes, I mean, I think I was probably 23 when this happened. I think he might have been like 26 or 27. He was married, and he was a church kid too. He had grown up in the local churches, and we were talking about basketball, and I was like, geez, this team is really good, aren't they? And then he goes, yeah, you're going to have a lot of time to really like that team when you're in the dark room. And I was like, what? Like, it was just the rudest, meanest thing. And the funny thing is like, he was talking to me about that team for a second. Like, he was like, oh yeah, that team's really good at first. And then I started getting into it, and I was like, yeah, this team's really good. And and then he just goes, you're going to go to the dark room. And it was really, really like offensive, because in the recovery, like when you say you're going to go to the dark room, that's like one of the meanest things you can say to somebody, because nobody wants to go to the dark room. At least that's how you're raised, is the dark room is this bad place. So I think it was kind of around that time that I started to realize that, these people didn't really care about me particularly. And I thought that they did, and then after a while, it was like, these people are just kind of, they're just kind of wrapped up in their kind of cult beliefs, is that like they believe these things in the Bible and they're absolute for these things, which is cool in a sense. But at the same time, I mean, if you believe something, yeah, at least, believe in it, wholeheartedly. But at the same time, like, they go to the extent where they don't talk to people who aren't in the recovery. They don't interact with people who aren't Christians, and and they just like ignore anybody. And it's like, it's just weird to me, now that I'm older and I look at it like, well, these people are kind of judgmental of anyone who doesn't believe the same thing they believe. And they have these constant meetings to rally people around, the beliefs that they have, and they keep people in this fold by these beliefs. You control someone's entire life with the kind of belief that if they watch movies, they'll miss, their reward, or if they date and have sex before marriage or something like that, that they'll lose their reward, or if, how I'm sure they would view it as, living in those sins. To them, you lose your reward, and to them, they don't talk to you in that sense. So, if they think that you're doing those things. So I think that, this can be really damaging for kids, who are confused and who don't understand that it's basically a negative situation to be born into this, family of faith, as they call it. They call it the family of faith, which everyone is brothers and sisters, according to them. Because if you don't conform, if you don't believe what they believe, then they view you as a sinner. They view you as someone who's possessed by Satan, or who's led by Satan and led by demons to sin, and all that kind of stuff that they say. And I just think that's really damaging, because not everybody is inclined people have different, inclinations. Like we found out that people are gay. Well, some people are just born gay. That's just their inclination, towards that. And you can't say, oh, that person's a sinner and they're gonna, lose their reward because they're gay, or you can't say this. What if someone doesn't believe in God? You can't say, oh, that person's going to go to hell just because they don't believe in God. That may be biblical, but that's really kind of closed-minded. It's really harsh, and it's and you can't say like, oh, we're not going to speak with somebody or walk down the same same street as someone or interact with somebody in business because they're not a Christian, which is what the Bible teaches, and which is what people in the recovery teach. I mean, granted, they're not as bad as Christians in the past have been. They don't go to, other countries and, invade and force people to believe what they believe. They don't really force anyone to believe what they believe in the sense that, they use power. But I do believe that for their members, they're constantly talking about, the reward and the benefit, and they're constantly keeping people to believe certain things about life, which, even though it's in the Bible, it's still, well, that may be good for some people, but not for everybody, So it's at the very least closed-minded and judgmental of anyone who has different beliefs, and at the worst, I believe it's damaging to people's lives. I won't get into too personal detail about myself, but I'm 29, and for my entire 20s, I've lived in this constant, worry that what I'm doing is going to have me lose my reward, and so it's like, I've lost a lot of life. I've lost out on friends. I've actually had girlfriends that I tried to convert, and I love these people, and they dumped me, or they left me because they thought I was a fanatic because I said, "Are you a Christian?" And they didn't. It wasn't that they were mean people. It's just that they didn't want to, be preached to, and because they just didn't. They had their own beliefs, and in the recovery they teach you if they don't believe in God, then you need to be, you need to run away from them, whether or not they're friends or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. So, they teach people to be, exclusive. They teach people to be kind of cultish, so ultimately, I would say that I'm not, necessarily against them. I'm more against the idea that, you have to conform to a certain way of living, which is according, even if it's according to the Bible, I think that that's a way to control people. I think that that's not being open-minded. I think it's not being open at all. And I don't agree with that. I think that people should be able to do what they want as long as they're not harming anybody else. I think people should be able to choose whether or not they want to, do certain things. And I don't think that people should have the fear of, losing your reward over their head. And I don't think people should, should have to worry constantly about being judged by other Christians if they do certain things. And I don't think they should say that the world is, the world and all this kind of stuff. They have this whole belief that the world's corrupted by Satan and that the world's produced by Satan. And I will say that, yeah, there's a lot of bad out there. There's a lot of, stuff that doesn't quite add up, with the government and the money systems and stuff like that. And I don't agree with, a lot that goes on. However, I don't know if I subscribe to the idea that the world is entirely corrupt. I think that part of it is, I think that some people are, and I think that there is bad, and I guess evil per se in the world. And it's not that I don't believe that, that there could be, a complete evil power out there that rules everything. But I do think that, when you tell members of a church, a congregation, that they can't do certain things, I think you're controlling them. I think that you're overstepping your bounds. in the sense that you are kind of teaching them things that makes them choose to conform, and it's like either they can conform or they can leave. It's not like, oh, you're accepted because we love you, because we're Christians and we just love you. No, it's like you have to come up to the standard of where we are, and you have to conform to where we are, or else you're not going to be an overcomer. And an overcomer is what they call somebody who overcomes the world and who is a successful Christian, is a winning Christian, who fought the good fight, like Paul and all this kind of stuff that they teach you, which is their main focus, is their main goal in the recovery, is they want people to be overcomers because they believe that's going to bring God back. More power to them if they think that, that's going to happen. And if that does happen, then I'd be happy, in the sense that, if there's going to be a better world that's going to come than the one that is right now, where I believe there's a lot of inequality and a lot of pain. If that happens, then I'm all for that, but I don't think they should teach people that they can't do certain things, because especially things that aren't really, like bad, sure, we shouldn't kill anybody. We shouldn't, it's not good to steal. It's not good to lie. But, when you say like you can't watch movies, or you can't go out to the fair, you can't go out and enjoy certain things that they deem quote unquote worldly, which is basically translates into wrong and negative, and you can't do that, then I think, okay, that's a big problem, and I have no problem with people loving Jesus if it helps you with your life. If you feel like you derive positiveness from that, if you feel like it makes you a better person and you can spread love and you can love other people, then that's fine. But I found that a lot of people in the recovery are judgmental of other people, and they feel that their knowledge is superior. They feel that their doctrine is superior. I will agree that much of their doctrine is actually superior to a lot of other doctrine. I mean, I've never read any Bible expositions better than what I've read in the recovery from Witness Lee and Watchman Nee. But that's just strictly Bible teachings, that's just doctrine. That's just kind of theology. But when you come into like the human realm, and when, what do humans actually do? Humans like to be entertained. Humans like, a lot of things that people in the recovery view wrong. They view it as wrong. So, I believe that there's a lot of control there. I believe that it's very similar to a cult, in the sense that they control they control the way people think by teaching you, certain things are bad, certain things you can't do, certain things are negative. And so, so that's about it. I just want to share my story. And I just want to talk about, the recovery, the local churches and the kind of things that they teach from a firsthand perspective. Like I said, I grew up there. I was born into it. And it's something that I've seen my whole life. Luckily, I was not physically forced to go to church. I guess you could say that. And I've had an open mind, and I've been able to, logically and use reason to balance the ideas. And I've done a lot of study in philosophy. I've done a lot of study in certain subjects like science, and and I've studied other religions. Like, I've done studies in anthropology. I've had anthropology classes in college and stuff like that. And it's interesting that there's so many religions out there, and there's so many beliefs, systems, and I believe that as humans, we want to believe something is in the afterlife. We want to believe that we're not just here and gone, because that's too, it's too quick. But that very well might be the reality. I'm not saying I'm an atheist. Like I said, I did have a God experience. But I've grown since then, I've grown cold in the sense that, I'm no longer, just loving towards the people in the church, because I think that the people in the church love those who conform. I think if you don't conform, they treat you like you're kind of an outcast. At least that's what I've experienced. If you have a different view of the things that they believe, and if you're like, you know, worldly according to them, they will shun you. They will treat you like, you know, they will just kind of ignore you. And I've been there, and I've been in, and it's not fun to be in that position when people think that you're a certain way, and you're just kind of like, well, whatever. I'm just living my life, you know. I'm not, okay, maybe I'm not super Jesused out right now, you know. I guess, you know, in a sense, I think there's a lot of really nice people in the recovery. I think there's a lot of really nice families, and, you know, granted, you know, they're not like out shooting each other. They're not like out partying or doing any crazy things, which I think, you know, is bad character, certain things like that, you know. But at the same time, you know, they do want you to conform to their beliefs, and they're no nonsense about their beliefs, and they totally, you know, constantly reiterate their beliefs, and constantly are talking about, you know, their beliefs, and that's what they're about. You know, they're not like a church where you come and then you know, you go and you just go to the movies, or you go and you have a picnic and it's like all good. Like, they're serious. Like, if you go meet, like, you're going to be praying, you're going to be singing, you're going to be enjoying God according to them. So they're all about God, which, you know, I commend them for being so absolute. But at the same time, you know, it's kind of you know, you have to conform to their beliefs, or else there's really no point in going. There's really no point in being there. And for me, you know, I just look at it like, I think it's you know, it's unfortunate if certain kids grow up in that situation, because they aren't really given a choice to whether or not they want God. They're just kind of forced into you know, believing what the Bible and Witness Lee and Watchman Nee teach, and if they don't, then they're kind of looked at like, oh, you know, you're just not a part of us, or something like that. So it can be a really exclusive type thing, and that I don't think is cool. So I think I've kind of explained where I'm coming from a lot, how I feel about the, you know, the local churches. Right now, I would say I'm on the fence. I still believe in God, in a sense, because I do believe that the world can't be created, you know, by itself. I don't think there was a Big Bang. I think that it was intelligent design, because it's just too perfect, and we're too perfect. You know, we're too evolved, or we haven't evolved, you know, but we are what we are, you know. We're just here. We're you know, we're humans, and I think that, if, you know, I think that there should be somebody out there looking, you know, after us, and I think that would be cool if there was. But a lot of times in my experience, I really haven't ever. I mean, I've been praying to God since I was a kid. I think the first time I ever prayed to God, you know, if I can remember, was probably around 9 or 10, maybe 11. You know, when I actually asked God for something, or prayed to Him in a way that, you know, I wanted Him to do something for me, or something like that. And as far back as I can remember, I can never remember actually having a prayer answered. And I still really can't. It's funny, because my family's been praying, but I just don't remember prayers ever being answered. I don't remember anything ever coming of praying, except, you know, things happen, and things happen the way they happen. And usually when people are praying, it's over a situation that either resolves itself, or happens because somebody got sick, or somebody, you know, praying for somebody who got sick or something. And it's never like, you know, okay, we're going to pray that this huge event is going to happen, and, you know, and then it doesn't happen, or we're going to pray that, you know, that this huge situation won't happen, and then it doesn't happen, you know, or something like that. I've never really experienced that, and I guess maybe that's a miracle. I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of experience with it, but people in recovery generally pray to God in the sense that they pray that God's move on earth, apparently according to them, they call it God's move on earth, would be fulfilled, when in reality, they're kind of just doing it themselves. It's like, is God really doing that, or are they doing that? And they might say, oh, it's a coordination or mutuality, and that might be a glory to them, and that's good if they feel like that's a glory to them. If they feel like that you're in God's move, etc., etc. So, I guess, to conclude, I'm just kind of on the fence as far as whether or not I believe in a God, because I just don't remember ever having prayers answered. There was a time when I really feel like I felt God's presence and I was praying to him, and I really, he made me happy. I felt like that. But at the same time, when I look back on it, I was really young. I mean, I was younger, in my 20s, and I was going through a lot mentally at the time, where I had like deep depression, and I had even gone into the hospital for having some depression and insomnia and stuff like that. And I don't think my experience is typical for members of the church. However, I think that where I was at the time might have affected my judgment, in the sense that I might have been in a vulnerable emotional state, and that could have affected my feelings, where I felt like, God was real to me, and I really felt God's spirit and all that kind of stuff. So it is what it is, and that's about all I have to say. Maybe I've been a little too personal in this video, but I feel like, or, in this talking, but I feel like, in order for me to really explain this, I have to say some personal things, which have to do with my life, because it's, I can't just be really general, because it's more authentic if I tell the truth about my personal, but I didn't say my name. I didn't say the cities that I'm from. So if anyone's out there listening to this and they know who I am, hey, I am what I'm here for the reasons why I'm here, and it is what it is. It's my experience. Sorry if I hurt anybody. I'm sorry if, anybody's really, hears this and they're mad at me. But this is just my opinion. This is just my perspective from somebody who did grow up in the church, from somebody who has been through a lot of their teachings and has been through a lot of their meetings and stuff like that. And I just feel the way that I feel because I've been somebody who's been judged. I've been somebody who's been shunned for things that I've done, which they deemed as worldly. I've had people, not talk to me because they think that there's something wrong with me, because the church, everybody kind of knows everything about everybody else in the church. They tell you that you're not supposed to gossip. They tell you that it's not good to talk about other people, but really, truthfully, a lot of the females in the church talk about everybody else. So it's like, if you have an issue, chances are the other members are going to know about it, because everybody talks. And the reason why they do it, the reason why they talk is, quote unquote, so they can pray for you. But in my experience, I've just looked at it like people have just looked at me like I'm different because I'm not, this or that, or because I've had this issue, and or because I'm just not conformed to where they are conformed, to the point where they're, all about Jesus, and I'm not, because I have a free will, and I have a opinion, and I like to do things other than just call on God and go to church, so that has really affected me in my life with the Lord's recovery. So ultimately, do I think that it's better off for people not to be in the recovery? I can't say that. I can't choose for anybody else. I can only speak for my situation. And in my situation, ultimately, I think that it's been a negative, because I've been judged, and because I trusted people in the recovery. I trusted people in the church, and I was let down by people who looked at me like I was different, because I wasn't where a lot of other people were, and I had issues and stuff like that. So I feel like if you can do it, if you're in the recovery and you can go and call on God and pray and stay in that situation, then you're all good. But if something happens, if you're sinning, or if you're just a little different, or if you're a little weird, if you can't conform fully, then they kind of look at you like you're not one of them, and they kind of shun you. And I'm not saying they shun you, like they just totally don't interact with you, but they just kind of look at you like, you're not up to par. And then you got kids like that kid who says you're gonna go to the dark room, if you talk about anything that's quote unquote worldly. So that will happen if you go and you talk about football, or you go and you talk about this, and they will kind of shun you. It's kind of like a club, and a lot of the guys who go there are kind of just really like, oh yeah, and it's just they have that look on their face, like people who are in a cult, they have this kind of enlightened look, and it's sort of crazy, it's sort of scary, and a lot of people in recovery have that look. So I'm sorry if I talk bad about anyone, particularly if anyone's offended that I'm talking bad about you. Whatever. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not opposed. I just believe that, for me personally, I'm only speaking from my perspective, and I can't say that people in recovery are completely open-minded to everything. I can't say that they're completely kind to other people, because they're not. And if I'm honest, they do believe that a lot of people are going to hell. They do believe a lot of people are going to be punished. They do believe that their doctrines are superior to everyone else, and I agree. I think your doctrines are superior, but the way that they talk about it often is like, oh, ours is the best way. And it's kind of like an unspoken feeling that everybody thinks that their doctrine is the best. And they do kind of look down on other Christians. They do look down on worldly people and other people, and it comes across as judgment. And I've been there, and I've tried to bring people into the church who are my friends in the world, quote unquote. And it did come across like I was judging them, like, oh, you have to be saved, and if you're not, we can't hang out. And it's like, I realized I was doing the same things that people did to me, and then I just stopped, and I said, I took a step back, and I realized, wait a minute, this is not right. This is kind of controlling, and this is kind of weird. So that's my story. If anybody else out there has been in the recovery, who was part of the recovery, I know there's a lot of people who were in the recovery and then they left and they felt like it's a cult. So I guess maybe I'm in that category. I do kind of feel like it's a cult, just in the sense that they want everyone else to conform to their doctrines. And that's about all I have to say. So if you got anything to say, comment or like the video. Appreciate it.